The Magical Mystery Tour, November 27th, 1967.
The Beatles Come to America. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Episode 13, The Magical Mystery Tour. Welcome to the Beatles Come to America podcast. I am your host, Tom Gouker, along with that Beatles Guru Brooke Halpin. The Summer of Love 1967 comes to a close, and we have our third Christmas gift from the Beatles. It's called The Magical Mystery Tour. It's released November 27th, 1967. Before we get into this album, we do have some housekeeping notes to get into, and we will get right into the episode. I have a podcast, and it's called Something Came from Baltimore, which is a music interview about jazz and R&B and blues. It's not really about Baltimore, but we want you to subscribe and be a part of that Be More music scene. The Beatles Guru, Brooke Halpin, is all-knowing when it comes to the Beatles, and he sweats that Beatle DNA. You have to follow him on his Facebook page, Come Together with the Beatles and Brooke Halpin. That link is also in our show notes, and we do have our own Facebook page. It's called The Beatles Come to America, and what we're asking is that you rank the U.S. albums from best to worst, and I think you're going to find that it's a lot harder than you think. As a bonus, at the end of every episode of The Beatles Come to America, we have a Brooke Halpin original song. So you're going to want to stick around for that also. We hope you subscribe and participate and enjoy it. Just remember, we love the Beatles, so love us in our comments. Enjoy our other creative projects. It's an invitation, so get a reservation. Let's start the interview. It's the Beatles Come to America, episode 13, The Magical Mystery Tour.
Roll up, baby.
It's time for the Magical Mystery Tour. It's coming to take you away.
Oh, please, take me away. Take me far, far away, Tom. Please.
Take you today.
When a man buys a ticket for a magical mystery tour, he knows what to expect. We guarantee him the trip of a lifetime, and that's just what he gets. The incredible magical mystery tour.
I'm ready.
And we welcome you to the Beatles Come to America.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. It's an honor to be with you, and thank you for giving me your guru-ness.
We'll get into the show real fast, but this is one of my favorite albums of theirs. Big fan of Magical Mystery Tour. It's the first album that I got from the Beatles. So as a kid, I was able to open it up and see all these pictures, and that was a big treat, and everyone looked great, and it was weird. But go ahead. We always started off by you explaining what the album looks like, along with your experiences when you bought it at the time.
No doubt about it that the title, I think, is extremely appropriate. You know, that this is a magical mystery album. That's good. And I remember getting this as a birthday present because my birthday is December 1st. And it came out on November 27th of 1967. So I got this for my birthday. I loved it. I loved side one. Now, see, unlike you, or I don't think you did this, but side one, was all stuff that we hadn't heard before. The thing that is interesting is that side two, with the exception of Hello, Goodbye, and I'm the Walrus, those were released just 3 days prior to the LP. So most of us already had Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, Be of You, Rich Men, and All You Need Is Love. So our perspective, unlike yours, was that, well, wait a minute. We're buying this album, but we already have these singles, so what do we need these songs on there for? So we felt like it was a bit of a ripoff. And the Beatles felt the same way. That's why they didn't like to have singles on their albums. Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane were not on the Sgt. Pepper album, thank you, Brooke, is because Brian Epstein was getting pressure from EMI to get a record out because they had not released anything since August of 66, which was a long dry period from August 66 to February. That's the main reason, and the only thing that they had, quote-unquote, in the can ready to go was Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. So back to Magical Mystery Tour. Yeah, I mean, I loved it. The album cover is, I have it right here in my hands. It's, it's psychedelic. It's kind of like pop art, the way that the title is in all the different colors, from red, yellow, green, and blue. And there are all these stars. The Beatles are in the middle of all these stars, and their name, Beatles, is spelled out in stars. And, of course, they're dressed in animal costumes. Now, the other thing is that it came, as you said, with a 24-page color picture book, which was extraordinary. That was really quite nice to see all the different pictures from the movie. So what's going on here is that we have to talk about not only the album, but then we have to talk about the movie as well. So there's really a lot of material to cover with the Beatles Come to America and their Magical Mystery Tour album and movie. The movie was shown in the UK, but it was not shown in the US, so we didn't know, even though we saw these pictures, these lovely pictures, when we got the album, we didn't know what the movie was about because they didn't broadcast it here because it was a flop in the UK for a number of reasons. It was released on Boxing Day, which is the day after Christmas. And a lot of people were not sitting around the TV. This movie was made for television. And a lot of people, and it was, color film. It had to be in color because it brings out the whole psychedelic effect. And when they can do reverse images and psychedelic treatments of images and things like that. Well, most people didn't have color TVs in the UK and also in the US. So that's one reason why it was a flop, because people were watching this in the UK on black and white TVs and they couldn't really see what the color movie looked like.
If you look to your left, ladies and gentlemen, the view is not very inspiring. But if you look to your right...
But the other reason why the movie didn't do well was because we were all used to, we had Hard Day's Night, we had Help. Now, the Beatles made this movie themselves. They all had cameras. And two friends of mine were involved with the movie. It was a trip, and it was an acid trip. There was a lot of acid going around with the Beatles at this time. And, Paul actually says, he wants to take you away. And then John whispers in the background, mystery trip. Now we know what trip means. Yeah, well, it's a double entendre. It's the trip on the coach. By the way, they call, buses coaches in England. But it's also a trip as in an acid trip. There's so much going on here. Now, we didn't know that back in 67. We didn't know what we know now, what the Beatles are up to. We just got this album. But the thing that was very curious even back then when you opened it up, it says that there are 4 or 5 magicians. So it's like 4 or 5. Well, what do they mean? Who's the 5th magician? And when you get into the booklet, they don't say 4 or 5 magicians. They say the 5 magicians. So this is all part of the mystery, right? And then you open up with the first track, and of course it's full, basically calling you to all come out, get on the bus, and it's another invitation. It's kind of like what he did with inviting the audience into Sgt. Pepper. There's a lot of similarities, and of course this was recorded right around the same time. I did want to mention that the back cover is really fascinating, and it was perfect for the time because it's like a kaleidoscope collage of the Beatles all dressed in their white tuxedos when they did that big production number in the movie for Your Mother Should Know. It was a very exciting album, and me and my friends, we all had it. We talked about The Magicians. We talked about the fact that it was a flop. The movie was. The album was a big success. Side one is fantastic. I mean, side one, in my opinion, is outstanding. But I already told you about side two and why I think it was a ripoff. So that's the beginning of my take on Magical Mystery Tour album.
There's a lot of stuff going on with this album. You have the Beatles' next album comes out basically a year from now, November 22nd, 1968. The singles that happened in 67 was Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields came out on February 13th. Penny Lane was 1, Strawberry was 9. Then in 7/17/67, All You Need Is Love is 1 and Baby You're a Rich Man is 60.
Right.
Brian Epstein, who died in 8/27/67, and then they were on their way to the Maharishi. And then you had a Hello, Goodbye, and I'm the Walrus 3 days before the album come out. So Hello was number 1, I'm the Walrus 44. This was a big hit. It was number 1 for 8 weeks. It was up for a Grammy Award for Best Album in 1969, and it lost to Glenn Campbell by the Time I Get to Phoenix album. So
by the time I get to Phoenix, she'll be rising.
Now, I look at it another way. I'm a child of the 70s, so when I got this, it looked like Christmas. There was no packaging of the Beatles that I ever had that was so much fun. I mean, you got your pictures, and you had your Paul is Dead clues, and you had kaleidoscopes and weird-looking pictures. When it comes to the movie, I did see it. I saw it on NPR, like in different variations where they interrupted it and stuff, but I really felt bad for the heavyset woman that was in it. I felt that she was exploited and used kind of as the gag.
Take 9. Okay. Oh, baby, you made me love you. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. You made me love you. And all the time you knew it. I guess you always knew it. You made me very happy.
And it was really? Yeah. I didn't think it was funny. I felt like she was gasping for air the whole time she was there. I felt that she was the butt of all jokes. The camera basically pointed at her the whole time, and the reaction and the spaghetti scene was gross. Yeah. And what I would have liked to see, and they didn't ask me because I was 2. But what I would have liked to see was that they would have turned this into like a video collage of all these songs. Like Your Mother Should Know is awesome. The Blue Jay Way is fun too. I'm the Walrus and Strawberry Fields has fantastic videos along with Penny Lane. Just loop them together, have the Beatles introduce them individually, give an extra like 5 minutes per Beatle. It would have been enough to fill an hour. And the bottom line is they rushed this out after Brian died. And there was really no big reason. I mean, there's the show must go on. Could have took a break a little. I think he died, and then what? You just put this thing out. Other bands would have maybe said we can put the brakes on maybe and catch our breath and figure out what we're doing. But they kept on moving.
Well, you bring up some interesting points, Tom. The heavyset woman, her name is Jessie Robbins, and she played the role. She was Ringo's auntie in the movie. I never thought, and I never interpreted her role as being exploited like you mentioned or taken advantage of. I thought she was absolutely wonderful, and because she added so much levity to this trip. And the other thing that was really nice is that there's another character on the bus, and his name is, the actor is Ivor Cutler, but his name in the movie was Mr. Buster Bloodvessel, which is hysterical. It's hysterical. It's not quite mean Mr. Mustard, but it's Mr. Buster Blood Vessel. Jesse and Ivor, or Blood Vessel and Ringo's auntie, they fall in love with each other. And there's a beautiful scene in the movie where they're dancing, they're together on the beach, exclaims his love for her. Just wonderful. It's one of the nicest things that happens in the movie. The problem with the movie was that, first of all, the movie and this album is Paul McCartney. It's all Paul. Side one, it's obviously Paul, mostly all Paul, with the exception of contributions from John with I'm the Walrus, which is major, which we'll talk about, and of course George with his Blue Jay Way. But the film was Paul's idea, and he thought, listen, lads, Brian's gone, so we got to stay focused. So he was acting as the manager of the Beatles in a way, in Brian's absence. He had this vision of himself as being an executive producer for Beatle movies going forward. And this was the first one. But there was no script.
Ready.
See up, fellas. Ooh, talk about your magical mysteries. I spent half an hour looking for that sugar, I tell you. I was half an hour looking for the sugar.
Is there one for me?
There's one over here, Richie. Oh, how are you, Bonzo?
He had ideas, yeah, but the main idea was, okay, listen, lads, we're going to get on the bus. We're going to go around and we're going to see what happens. And that's what they did. And they had little bits here and there, they'd stop for fish and chips or something. But there was no real direction. It was aimless. It was experimental. They were doing an experimental film. They give Ringo credit as the director, by the way, on this movie. But according to Chris Walter, who was there, and he saw them all with their own cameras, that they were 4 individual directors. Well, if you have 4 different directors shooting different things, probably going to come out to be a bit of a mess. So that's what was going on, and that was, I believe, the reason why this movie got trashed in the reviews. And you're right. At best, what they should have done a series of music videos, because they were the leading edge and they were the cutting edge, and now they were getting musically, and now they're getting into visual application like they started to do with Rain and Paperback Writer, but that's more like studio kind of stuff, controlled. These music videos, they're really artistic. And also, as you'd mentioned, the music videos for Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane are brilliant, I think. I remember seeing them back then. It was like, oh my God, look at what they're doing. Because they were so innovative. They were getting into the avant-garde. They were taking the avant-garde world of art and music, and they were bringing it into their world of music and songwriting and music production. And gosh, yeah, you're right. If they had done that, the movie would have been a much bigger success. But this is Paul's baby. This is Paul's album.
It's funny. He's done this before with Give My Regards to Broad Street. You think he'd learn his lesson.
Well, wait a minute now. Wait a minute.
No, that's a terrible
Give My Regards
movie
to
too.
Broad Street. I saw that when it came out in New York City.
I've watched people walk out of the movie theater when I saw it the first week.
That was a scripted movie.
Mm-hmm.
There was a plot line. The tapes he was working on a new album, and he hired this one guy to deliver the tapes, and he thought the tapes were stolen, and there was whole event of trying to find the missing tapes. There was no plot line with a Magical Mystery Tour. None. That's a huge difference. And by the way, yes, to your point about Give My Regards to Broad Street. This is New York City on an evening night on Broadway at a movie theater. I went with my girlfriend at the time and some other friends. There were, with no exaggeration, I would say maybe 15 people in the whole theater.
Mm-hmm.
And for, 15 people to go to a movie in New York City it's unheard of. It's unheard of. So yeah, it was not a hit. But getting back to Magical Mystery Tour.
yeah. Well, I mean, just saying, like he got hammered for Magical Mystery Tour. He got hammered for Give My Regards to Broad Street. But if you look at his press, like he doesn't really take ownership of it. He kind of just sidewinds it a little. Doesn't fully take the blame, but in theory, they were two of his bombs. This is a bomb. This is a bad idea. There are so many people that were coming to them with actual scripts. They could have easily said, look, we're busy. We just made Sgt. Pepper. It's like really busy. Sketch us out something. We'll look at it. The fact that they would, scrap all these really creative ideas and do some on their own, just a really bad idea. They learned.
You're absolutely correct. It was a mistake, no doubt about it.
Yeah. But for me, as a fan of the 70s, and I'll get to your, but I'm sorry, this was just like a Christmas package of really cool pictures, really good songs. It feels like a greatest hits album. And they're wearing Walrus clothes and some wacky stuff. Really interesting things to look at. So when it comes down to it, this actually, we'll rank this, but this is my second. So you got Revolver, and then you got, it's that high. Yeah, I love this album. But,
wow. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it was one of your first albums when you were a young lad.
Sure.
And it made a big impression on you. George and John and Ringo, they were not into this at all.
Mm-hmm.
They did it, but they were not really into it. And John and George and Ringo were doing their own thing. Like Paul would say, okay, well, you go off and do something, and I'm going to go and do my thing. So there was no focus on this, on the making of the movie. I want to tell you one of the funniest things that happened that most people don't know about, and I have a photograph of this. They're driving around through the English countryside, and again, Paul's idea was to just have a bunch of people on the bus, a variety of different types of people. So you had the chubby, jolly auntie, Ringo's auntie. You had a midget, a midget who took pictures. He was like the photographer. And you had other actors who had done different things in some films in England. And then a bunch of friends. And it's the idea is just to go out and see what happens. Well, so they're going around, they're driving rather aimlessly, and they come across a little footbridge. And this was a pretty big bus. And they get to the bridge, and then all of a sudden the bus stops. And they're like, oh, hey, what's going on? The bus got stuck on the bridge because the bridge was too narrow for the bus. and there's a photograph of the bus stuck on the bridge, which I think is hysterical. That should have been in the movie.
Definitely.
It's not in the movie because that certainly would have been hysterical.
And I think John said that because they had Magical Mystery Tour on the side, that fans and photographers were chasing them around through the area. That would have been interesting. So just the whole fish and chips entrance where they walk in, just a mob of people, like watching them and then watching them eat. It's just it's interesting.
It's interesting, yeah. But John, as you said, he made sure that they took down the signs on the bus because he didn't want all the fans following them, which is also interesting. But to
come back, let them take you away on a magical mystery tour. Coming soon.
Getting back to let's talk about the first track.
Okay, the Magical Mystery Tour. Let's talk about Magical Mystery Tour.
By the way, Paul says this is a drug trip. It's a Magical Mystery Tour trip. And again, it's all about, tripping on LSD. And they were all doing it at the time. So that's what's going on here overall. And he even says, roll up, referring to what? Roll a joint is what he's talking about. Roll up a joint. And the first track is, I think, excellent. Production-wise, it's similar to the production techniques used when they were working on Sgt. Pepper. Paul and the Beatles want the fans to join them on this trip on the Magical Mystery Tour. And the brass instrument fanfare, 4 trumpets, just wonderful. The trumpets work so well because that's part of the announcement. Come on, roll up for the Magical Mystery Tour, da-da-da-da-da-da, kind of thing. So the arrangement is terrific. The song does change tempo halfway through, or almost toward, or at least toward the ending anyway. It changes beat, and it changes tempo. And then it goes into a third section, which is this ending, which is really dreamy and mysterious and very trippy.
This song is awesome. It gives me chills down my spine. Roll up the Magical Mystery Tour. It's a great song loud. It's a jam, and the drumming for Ringo kills. You're right, the trumpets are awesome. Ambrosia had a hit on this, the top 40 hit, 1976, Magical Mystery Tour. It is a fantastic song. Could have been a single, in my opinion. Could have been like a double A with a Fool on the Hill. I think it would have done really well. All right, The Fool on the Hill. It's a Paul song. Who is the Fool? Could it be the Maharishi? We don't know. You'll tell me. The flutes are awesome on here. There's many jazz covers. Sergio Mendes made it in Brazil.
He never gives an answer, but the fool on the hill sees the sun going down, and the eyes in his head see the world.
Made a big,
yeah, that was a big hit. That was a big hit for them.
They grabbed that right away and had a big hit in 1968. If they're not going to release it as a single, someone's going to make some money off of it. It's a classic. Beautiful song, good video attached to it. Was that in the movie?
Oh yeah!
Okay.
Oh yeah. My goodness!
That was
that
was a highlight of the song was awesome. Okay, talk about The Fool on the Hill.
This is very fascinating. So as you say, who is the fool on the hill? Paul has said that it was about the Maharishi because he was always giggling. He's a fool, but he's also a wise man. What's interesting is that in the movie, Paul, he unbeknownst to the other Beatles, during production, he disappeared. Nobody knew where Paul was one day. He flew to France because there was a hill in France that he liked. Now, for God's sake, you would think that he'd be able to find a hill in England. I mean, there's a lot of, the English countryside is loaded with lovely hills. But no, Paul wanted to go to France. So he went to Nice, outside of Nice, France. And the funny thing is that he went with a cameraman. And when he landed in France, he was, of course, greeted by the authorities. And Paul didn't have his passport. That's how he must have been stoned out. And here you're traveling to another country. Now, he knew that when you go to another country, you have to have a passport. He was able to get away with it because he was, after all, Paul McCartney. So the funny thing is that it is one of my favorite songs. It is. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. The funny thing is that he's singing about the fool on the hill. And when you watch the film, the only person that's on the hill is Paul. So it's like, oh, wait a minute now. Is Paul trying to tell us that he's the fool on the hill? But it's great cinematography. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful. shots of Paul, and he's adorable, and he's cute, he's making faces, and he's jumping off a trampoline, and the sun's and he does when the sun, there's the lyric about the sun going down, and there's shots of the sunset. It's really quite wonderful. The music is I think breathtakingly beautiful, and what's nice about it is that there's a lot of harmonicas again. We talked about the harmonicas on being for the benefit of Mr. Todd. And so, again, on this song, John plays the harmonica and George plays the harmonica. And when you listen to it, you can hear that the sound of the harmonicas during parts of this song on the chorus are backwards. So it almost sounds like an accordion. Do things backward, you're reversing the attack and the delay technically. And it's a brilliant sound that goes along with Paul's song. You got Ringo playing finger cymbals, which is really nice. You mentioned the flutes, but this is a Paul McCartney composition. And he's playing piano, acoustic guitar, he's playing the recorder, he's playing the bass, and he's playing a penny whistle.
I hear recorder more than I hear a flute. That's the recorder.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah.
It's a classic song. So far, you have two amazing songs, and you go right into Flying, which I believe is the only song that all four of them have got credit on. Am I right by saying that?
I think so far, yeah. So far, that's right. So far. Yeah, there's one other one coming up later. Yeah.
The song working title was Aerial Tour Instrumental. Which is a cool name. But Flying's also good too. I never get tired of this song also. It's very funky at the beginning. It's very 60s sounding. It's a little dated, but it's cool. And I love them all singing in unison. I still give it a thumbs up.
When you're stoned, you're flying basically. So another reference to the drugs that were going around. Sound of the guitar, there's two electric guitar parts. One's played by George. The first guitar part is played by George. The way the electric guitar is produced is unlike any other sounding electric guitar on a Beatles record. It sounds like the guitar sound is squashed. It's being processed in such a way. And then you have this other mellow toned lead guitar coming in, and that's Paul on lead guitar coming in and playing kind of like a contrapuntal lead guitar part with George. There's a lot of tape loops going on here, and John's playing the mellotron and an organ, so he's doing keyboards and tape loops. And then we have Ringo also doing tape loops, and that's very interesting. Ringo first started doing tape loops back on Revolver, if you recall. He did tape loops when we talked about Tomorrow Never Knows. All the Beatles made tape loops for Tomorrow Never Knows, which, by the way, in 1966, what the hell was a tape loop? No one even knew what the hell it was. And I remember listening to that, and it sounded like a bunch of seagulls crying, which in fact it was actually Paul's voice sped up and played backwards, laughing. But back to Flying. The sound of Flying is very appropriate for this album. It's very, very trippy, especially the ending. But it's nice because even though it's an instrumental, we have all four Beatles at one point singing the melody. La, 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 la. All four, which is really nice. But the ending is completely tripped out. Again, trip, right? Magical Mystery. Should have called it the Magical Mystery Trip. But anyhow. And what they did was at the ending, when you listen to it, Tom, as I'm sure you've had many, many times, I know you have, there's a lot of backward, the backward tape loops are going on. It's like this slapping noise, and it's, again, very mysterious. It's like, okay, where are they going with this? Where are we going on this bus ride, on this magical mystery tour? Now that we're quote-unquote flying, we're flying on a bus. That's what's going on with this song.
It's interesting, and it's very unusual. It's nothing that they've done before, and it just, you're like, oh, this is a filler, but it's an interesting filler, and it matches the movie perfectly for what it's being used for. To me, it stands alone, I think, just because it's a creative filler. The Blue Jay Way is the next song. It's a George song, kind of documenting his experience in the Hollywood Hills. I love this song. I love the drum tom, like of the drums at the beginning. Do. Like, it's very ominous, and the background swirls of the vocals in the background.
Yeah.
And at the end, dun, 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 and then it just kind of spazzes out. Yeah. Very awesome. Very, very cool song. I think when we talked about George Harris before, I always said how great his work is with the Beatles. This is a great song. You know, it's not even one of his best. It's just still a great song.
I have a lot to say about this song. George was staying at a house up in the Hollywood Hills on a street by the name the street was called and is called to this very day, Blue Jay Way. That's the name of the street. Now, how did George end up on Blue Jay Way? Well, I know how he did, Tom. I had a very close friend who is no longer with us, and his name is Robert Fitzpatrick. Robert Fitzpatrick was Brian Epstein hired Robert to be the Beatles' attorney for the West Coast. Brian contacted Robert and said, hey, listen, George is going to go out to California, and he's going to go to Los Angeles for a week before he goes up to San Francisco. And do you know where he can stay? So as it turned out, Robert was just about ready to leave to go to his vacation home in Hawaii. So Robert said, well, George can stay at my house. So George stayed at Robert Fitzpatrick's house on Blue Jay Way. Now, he's waiting for Derek Taylor to show up, who was working with the Beatles. But Derek and Brian had a huge falling out, and Derek quit. Derek continued on to be a publicist for the Byrds and the Beach Boys, just to name a few musical acts. Derek was coming in from London to Los Angeles that night with his wife on August 1st. And George was waiting to greet Derek and his wife. It happened to be a foggy night in August, which is a bit unusual, actually, out here. Derek got lost because the roads, I don't know if you've been up to the Hollywood Hills, but when you go north off of Sunset up into the hills, the streets are narrow and they're very windy, and if it's foggy out, it took 2 hours for Derek to try to find Robert's house. And at this point, George jet lagged because he flew in just from London just before that, and he's exhausted. He wants to go to bed, but he's trying to stay up to greet Derek and his wife, Jen. In order to do that, Robert Fitzpatrick had this small little organ in his house. And on that very organ, George started writing Blue Jay Way. And as you said, it's the lyrics. He's writing about the actual evening, about what was going on. And as a matter of fact, I have a copy of the lyrics on Robert Fitzpatrick's letterhead. So, in case anyone has any doubts about the story that I'm telling you right now. It's a dreamy, very dreamy song, especially at the beginning, because George he's falling asleep. There's a song upon L.A. It's like, in other words, gosh, I'm really tired. It's really the way he sounds tired when he's singing the vocals, which parallels and underscores what he was going through, that night on Blue Jay Way, waiting for Derek and his wife.
I was trying to figure out if you like this song just by the way you were talking. Like, I think you're giving some context and texture about what the song's about. But when it boils down to it, are you loving this song? Do you like this song?
Love this. I absolutely love this song.
Okay.
It's a magical track. It absolutely belongs on this album because it's magical and it's kind of mysterious sounding. Okay. But what I wanted to mention to you and to your audience is that George went to L.A. to be with Derek for a week, and he also met with Ravi Shankar in Los Angeles at that same time. Then Derek and Patty Harrison, because they were married at the time, and Derek's wife Jan, and I don't know who the other people were, but they went up to San Francisco. This is during August 1967. This is the peak of the summer of love, Tom. And I assure you, with no exaggeration, that was the case. I was in Los Angeles in August 1967. I didn't know that George was. I knew that I heard rumors that the Beatles were going to be in San Francisco, is what we were hearing. So he goes up to San Francisco because he figures, this is the epicenter of the peace movement, of the flower children, of the all you need is love, summer of love. We got to go to San Francisco. Be sure to wear flowers in your hair. I mean, this is where it was at. So they go up to San Francisco. They get up to Haight-Ashbury. And before they get out of the limousine, George decided to take some LSD because he was doing a lot of acid back then. So all of them took acid. And it came on pretty fast, supposedly. I guess it did. So now they're getting out of the limo, and they're walking around, and people, there are crowds of people, and now people are gravitating, and they're surrounding George, and now he's really starting to come on strong with the acid, and he gets a hold of a guitar, and he starts playing some songs on an acoustic guitar. He's wearing, by the way, Indian print trousers, and he's got heart-shaped sunglasses on. I've got photographs of this. I mean, it's really quite beautiful.
It's a cool looking picture. Yeah, I agree with you.
Oh, God, yeah. However, now he's starting to freak out because now he's getting more and more turned on with the LSD, and he's starting to hallucinate. So they dash back to the limo, and he's in the limo, and then he looks out the window, and he sees all of these faces of fans, putting up their faces against the glass windows. So it's just a little sidebar onto what was going on, with George after he spent a week in Los Angeles. He was there in San Francisco. He was very, very disappointed in what he saw. Yeah, that he would have been, involved around people who were artists, who were being creative and creative musicians, and he discovered that they were just a bunch of hippies that were drug addicts and a bunch of dropouts. And after that, he then decided that, drugs really was not the way to go, supposedly. He kind of chilled out on it. Now, getting back to the song, there's something, of course, when he goes, please don't be long, and then John and Paul, don't be long. Well, there's a double entendre, which the Beatles love to do with, wordplay. There's like, don't be long, as in, don't take so long to get here, Derek, to the house. But then there's also, don't be long, As in other words, don't be attached to anything, which does apply to the times, because the counterculture was you didn't want to be attached to what was going on in society, the status quo. So don't belong to that. Belong to the new movement. Be a part of the flower power. Be a part of the summer of love. Be part of what the Beatles were doing, and all you need is love, and have nothing to do, basically, with what your parents are doing. The cello in the song is brilliant, but what's even more brilliant is that they took part of the song and they reversed the entire friggin' song, and they mixed it in during different parts of Blue Jay Way, which is, from a production perspective, we know that the Beatles were fond of backward recording techniques, starting with, back to the days of Revolver and I'm Only Sleeping, with George's backward guitar part, not to mention Tomorrow Never Knows, etc. But this is an amazing effect. When you listen to it, you don't know what's happening. Well, now you know what it is, and I think it's done absolutely brilliantly and very tastefully.
Don't belong to a movement that now George Harrison has condemned. It's like, it's like, okay, now he got the full picture. He's not into it, so he.
Yeah, well, at least not as what he's seeing in the U.S. It's certainly not in San Francisco at that time.
It's back to the Maurici and to the next thing.
That's exactly right.
The next song is Your Mother Should Know. It is one of those retro Paul songs that he loves to do. By far, when you see the video from the movie, they are having so much fun that everyone's kind of laughing through it. It's a lot of fun. It really elevates the song, I believe. I love this song also.
Yeah, Your Mother Should Know, 100% Paul. Paul's on the piano, bass, John's on the organ. The background vocals are superb. And as you said, it's like a music hall 1930s production number. Kind of like an old-fashioned, what's his name, Busby Berkeley kind of look. That's the style of the song. And in terms of the movie, now they didn't do this. They did this as the closing number on the movie, which is a good idea because it was a huge production number. They're walking down this huge spiral staircase and they're decked out in white tuxedos. Now, this would have been a great song to sing on the bus. Could you imagine everybody going da 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 ba 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 da 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 da? It would have been perfect, but they didn't do that. The strange thing about this, the production number in the movie, is that John, George, Ringo wearing red carnations, and Paul is wearing a black carnation in his lapel. Now, Tom, let me ask you a question. Other than what I just mentioned, have you ever seen a black carnation when you go into a flower shop?
I don't think I've ever saw one.
No, they don't exist. You can't grow a black carnation. So what the hell is Paul doing with the black carnation? And someone asked him years later, hey, Paul, how come you have a black carnation on your lapel? Oh, well, they ran out of red ones, so they gave me a black one. Which is a load of rubbish. Listen, I love Paul McCartney very, very much. But, when you start seeing stuff like that, well, they gave me a black one because they ran out of red ones. That's a bunch of rubbish. So, it's a great song. It's a toe capper. And again, it's a tribute to moms out there. It's like, your mom's all right kind of thing. It's like a nod to the parent, to the mother. That's what Paul's doing, which is something that Paul would do in not the same way as she's leaving home, but there is a bit of a similarity in terms of acknowledging the parent.
This is a super strong album cut. You were talking about the Black Carnation. It's the same deal as Paul wearing flip-flops for the Abbey Road. And they asked why he took it off. He goes, well, because it was hot. Doesn't make sense. So a little ill fit logic there. So
yeah, it's so hot. I want to burn my feet on the pavement.
Yeah. I agree. And talk about, if you want to put some pause that clues, you got I'm the Eggman, I'm the Walrus.
Oh boy.
Yeah. What a great song. What a great song. I was listening to it just for this. This is the first song that they produced after Brian's death. Eric Burden thinks he's the Eggman. Eric Burden's from the Animals. The video is fantastic. It's weird. It's fun. It's very shocking that this isn't a number one for some reason. Maybe it's too over the top. I don't know. If you had Strawberry Fields Forever first and people were already prepped that, the Beatles could kind of come out with something like this, to have I'm the Walrus, you think, oh, okay. This is great. And it's I'm glad that they released it as a single.
Oh my God, yes. So, I Am the Walrus. Now, this was released as the B-side to Hello Goodbye. And John was extremely disappointed about that because he wanted Walrus to be the A-side. And supposedly, he was so upset that he kind of, he didn't throw in the towel, but he was kind of like, screwed in a way. I mean, to a certain extent, that's how disappointed he was. Because he wanted to bring the band more in that direction, away from the poppy Hello Goodbye. When I first heard I'm the Walrus, I thought that I had lost my mind. It's mind-blowing, mind-boggling. It's completely innovative. It's cutting new ground. It's things that we have never heard before. It's avant-garde. It's psychedelic. It's found art. In other words, taking the source sound of a radio and just screwing around with the radio when you're mixing and then just flying it in on the fly, of mixing it into the song at random, arbitrarily. I mean, this kind of stuff, Tom, at the time, it's almost difficult to take. It's unfathomable, really, when you think about it. And that's what they were doing. And this is John's doing. This is his song. This is his baby. Now, John said that the first verse he wrote after taking an acid trip, and then he took another acid trip, and then he wrote the second verse. I mean, I could see that. You can hear that in the lyrics. I mean, these lyrics are like, what in the hell is he talking about? What is he talking about? Climbing up the Eiffel Tower, singing Hare Krishna, man, you should have seen him kicking Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, come on. What is all that? Sitting on a cornflake waiting for the van to come. Well, I know where that came from in a way. But also like, yellow matter custard dripping from a dead dog's eye. I mean, these lyrics and the imagery, it's almost absurd. But John Lennon could do it in such a way that it just completely captivated most listeners, even though they didn't know what in the world he was singing about. And then there's an interruption in the song. It's a total interruption because, it's just, and of course that, by the way, that melody, me as you are me, is based upon the sound of a siren in the UK. You can hear it. Okay. So this is the creative mind of John Lennon. He hears sirens going by and goes, "Oh, hey, that's a great melody for a song, Incredible. Okay. So I am the Eggman. They are the Eggman. I am the Walrus. Goo goo gachoop. Well, what is a goo goo gachoop? Does anybody know what a goo goo gachoop is? No, it's gibberish. but it sounds good. And then all of a sudden, there's like this interruption. Sitting in an English garden, which is like a whole other song comes in the middle of this really abstract avant-garde song. It's so different to begin with, and then it becomes even more different. It's like, how far can he push the envelope? John Lennon had no limit to his creative abilities. And this, to me, probably just as much as Strawberry Fields Forever. I would say that that these two songs, Strawberry Fields and Walrus, that these two songs are the absolute apex of him incorporating all of these different elements I've mentioned. You know, the avant-garde world, found music, the bringing in the radio, the abstract lyrics, all of this stuff. And then, you know, to top it all off, then at the end of the song, which we'll get into, you know, there's a whole out chorus, and George Martin brought in a bunch of like 16 singers to sing the chorus. Let's talk more about this, okay? Lewis Carroll was a big influence on John, and in particular there was a poem called The Walrus and the Carpenter, except later in life John said he screwed up because the Walrus was the bad guy and the Carpenter was the good guy. So what's interesting about this musically, among many other things, is that unlike most songs, except for the three-chord songs like Twist and Shout and, you know, the simple songs where there's only three major chords, okay? It's like C, F, G, C major, F major, G major. And that's it, right? Well, or D major, G major, A major. In this song, there's every chord in the musical alphabet, every chord, and they're all major chords. So the chord uses A major, B major, C major, D major, E major, F major, G major, and then repeats again to A major. No one had ever done this before. So again, just from a harmonic perspective, this is completely unheard of. And it works like a friggin' masterpiece. It is a masterpiece for so many reasons. That's one of the reasons why, because of what's going on harmonically. He does make a reference to Lucy in the Sky, which is kind of interesting, because he says, see how they fly like Lucy in the Sky. Lyrically, he's bringing that in to this song, which has nothing to do with the Walrus, but it's an abstract, so it works. The Yellow Meta Custard and Dead Dog's Eye was really a rewrite of a nursery rhyme that John and his buddy, Pete Shotton. Now, Pete Shotton was his buddy from Liverpool when they were kids, you know, when they were in their single digits. And this came from a nursery rhyme. That's where those lyrics came from. And it fit in. It fit in with this song. That's exactly right. But when you look at the album cover, if you look carefully, they're dressed in animal costumes, right? And you figured, well, John's got to be the Walrus, right? Wrong. If you look at the album cover, John, who was wearing his round wire rim glasses, is wearing a different costume, and the Walrus is Paul. Paul's dressed up as a walrus on the cover of Magical Mystery Tour. So, you know, here again, you know, is part of the inconsistency and the mystery surrounding the whole Beatles and how people are trying to interpret everything. The Walrus is Paul. The Eggman, however, is Eric Burdon. And how do I know that Eric Burdon is the Eggman? Because John, back in the swinging London 60s and elsewhere in the country and in the U.S., would go, you know, there'd be parties all the time. Well, Eric Burdon was part of the, you know, the London music scene, along with Mick Jagger and Pete Townsend and Keith Moon and all the bands that were going around at the time. And at one party, and John witnessed one night that Eric had a girl with him, and she was naked. And Eric got some eggs from a nearby fridge, and he cracked the eggs over her breasts. So the Eggman is Eric Burden. And not too many people know that. And I know that's true because that's according to John Lennon. Now, that's fascinating in itself, just as a backstory. Ending as a counterpoint, the bass goes down, the bass line goes down while the strings go up. And again, harmonically, compositionally, this stuff is so advanced. Nobody is doing anything like this. I don't know how they came up with these ideas. I really don't. John's voice is very bright, very nasally, and he wanted it that way. He asked for the engineers to make it sound that way, so they used a cheap microphone to get that nasally tone on his vocal. This song is a complete masterpiece. The ending is another thing that's open to interpretation. What are they saying at the end, Tom, during the out chorus?
Everybody's got one.
Yeah, okay. So you hear everybody's got one. Okay. Now, the printed lyric on lyric sheets and lyric books, music books that I have, it says, oompa, oompa. Everybody's oompa. Now, what is an oompa? Nobody knows. Some people say an oompa is an umbrella. I don't know. But what they did was they had these 16 singers that George Martin worked with, and he multi-tracked their voices. They first they sang oompa, oompa, everybody's oompa. And this is what I hear. And you see that the trick is that when you say three different things at the same time, you don't know what the hell they're singing. And it's open to interpretation. But I'm going to tell you what the two other things that they're saying that's mixed in and camouflaged. One is everybody smokes pot, everybody smokes pot, everybody smokes pot, everybody's oompa, everybody smokes pot. And the other one is, can I say the F word on the station or no?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I can? Oh.
Well, in the podcast part, not on the stage. I don't know. But yeah, we can stay in the podcast.
And then the other thing that they mixed in was everybody's fucked up. And when you mix them all together, you don't know, you can't really make out what they're saying. So that's what's going on. And again, to have all of these things that I talked about, and forgive me for being so long-winded on this song, but I have to because there's so much going on. This is an absolute masterpiece that no one else could have ever done. And as I mentioned before, I believe that this is the apex of this type of song for John, along with Strawberry Fields Forever.
They've come a long way from I Want to Hold Your Hand 3 years ago, right?
Oh my God.
No one is able to duplicate this, like all the other bands, and they pivot away from it really quickly, it's really interesting that they could have kept on going in this direction. And so we're going to turn this album over, side 2, and it's Hello Goodbye, and it's a Paul song. It's the first single released after Brian's death. It has